Hello, Los Estudiantes. We're going to be talking about the integumentary system in this lecture. And as we continue in anatomy and physiology, I'm going to try to start each of these lectures with a little case study about what happens if that tissue or if that system isn't functioning properly. Let's go ahead and let's see what's going on with little Ella.
I would lay in bed at night and just think about every part of her body. Think about her little feet and think about her legs.
Tell me if it hurt you.
Think about the bandages and how did I need to cut something a certain way so that it would work for that particular wound.
There you go. Stand up. Okay. What time is it? How'd we do? 8:06, 2 hours. Not too shabby.
Yeah. I think that when you think of a butterfly, you think of a tiny little thing that flies all around, but it's very delicate, so you can't touch it. What about me? What about me? I'm a good student.
In some ways, Ella is a very typical 9-year-old.
Who wants me? Yay! Yay!
But in other ways, Ella is unlike any other kid you've ever met. And that she is a fighter, and she has to deal with a lot that 9 and 10-year-olds don't have to deal with.
You prefer the oil? Okay. It's not, this is the oil, so it doesn't sting. Better?
Mm-hmm.
Good morning. Can I unhook you? Oh, move your legs a little bit so I can unhook you. What? I'm going to unhook you, okay? All right. Start getting up, girly. Gentle.
I'll normally describe it in like a simple way that kids can understand. It's just a disease where all sorts of different kids get scars on different parts of their body.
So, what do you think is wrong with Ella? Which system, I said we're doing the integumentary system, what do you think is going wrong with Ella? If you said we're talking about her skin, you're correct. Most of the organ system will be made up of specific types of tissues. Remember, tissues form organs, organs form organ systems form organisms. So we've got some different types of tissue that typically interact with every single type of system. We have nervous tissue, which involves neurons and nerves. We have epithelial tissue, which is usually on the outside surfaces of organs. We have muscle tissue, which is in muscle. And then we have connective tissue, which does a variety of things, but it does keep the whole system working together. It includes fats and other stuff, padding tissue, bones, tendons, those sorts of things. So, if we were looking at the 4 types of tissue, what type of tissue do you think that Ella is having a problem with? We're going to keep that thought in mind. Right now, we're talking about the integumentary system. So, the integumentary system is your body's outer layer. It's made up of your skin, hair, nails, and glands and nerves that are associated with your skin. Okay, it is a type of epithelial tissue. It is called your epidermis. And it consists also of the epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. So skin or dermal tissue has several layers that have different functions. We have the epidermis, which produces pigment, and if you guys remember, pigment was really important for something. well, a couple of different things. Then we have the dermis, which is kind of like the supporting layer. And then we have the subcutaneous tissue, which has a layer of fats, which acts for insulation and those sorts of things. Epithelial tissue covers all of the body's surfaces, both inside and out. So think about that. Epithelial tissue covers all body surfaces, both inside and out. It is the main glandular tissue. It's attached to underlying connective tissue and a basement membrane. And for instance, if you were getting a tattoo, you wouldn't just inject into epithelial tissue, because epithelial tissue oftentimes, because it's on the outside, is regenerated often. And so if you want an ink to stay visible for a long period of time, you'd have to inject it underneath these layers that would slough off easily under the basement membrane. So ink tattoos are injected underneath the basement membrane so that the ink stays longer in the tissue. Now I said skin sloughs off pretty quickly, right? All epithelial tissue pretty much does. It takes about 27 days for the entire outer layer of your skin to shed and be replaced. That's about 1.5 pounds of skin cells a year that you're just whoosh, 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 sloughing off into the wind. Where do you think all those dead skin cells go? They turn into dust. These little critters right here, they love to eat dust. This is a dust mite. You'll find them in couches, in your bed sheets, in rugs, in carpeting, right? They like to stay wherever skin cells might collect. That's one of the reasons why you want to vacuum and wash your bedding so often, is because you want to make sure that you're vacuuming out any excessive skin cells and any accumulated dust mites. Epithelial tissue is described in a variety of different ways. One of the ways is its shape, and one of the ways is how the cells are stacked on top of each other, or if they're stacked at all. If it's a simple epithelial tissue, it's only going to be comprised of one layer of cells. And if it's a stratified epithelial tissue, that means that it has multiple layers of cells stacked together. This right here is squamous epithelial cells. Those look like they've been squashed, kind of like pancakes. These are cuboidal. These are columnar, right? So if I said it is simple squamous, that means it's a single layer of squamous cells. If I said that it's a stratified columnar, then it would be multiple layers of columnar cells. So what is wrong with Ella? I said it's going to be, what type of tissue was it? We had epithelial, we had connective, we had nervous, and we had muscle tissue. If you are figuring out that it's epithelial tissue, in this case, most specifically her epidermis, then you are spot on. Mutations in the epidermis can cause minor or major skin diseases. In this case, she has a mutation in a very important protein called collagen 7. Collagen 7 is a connective protein that helps hold the epidermis together to the dermal tissue, okay? Now, you probably have heard of collagen. Maybe your parents drink collagen. It's really good for your joints and for muscle development. You also have lots of it in your skin when you're young. You've got all of this great collagen. See how this collagen is binding that epidermis and dermal tissue together, okay? But as you get older, the collagen starts to break down, especially if you have significant sun damage. So for all you kiddos that are going out and sun tanning every weekend, you're breaking down your collagen, and that's going to cause eventual wrinkles. Because as you lose your collagen, you lose your elasticity in your skin, and that causes wrinkle formation. What's happening with Ella? Well, when Ella gets touched, she doesn't have the collagen that holds her epidermis to her dermal tissue. And so the epidermis raises from the dermis and the basement layer, right? And it creates a blister. So we probably all had blisters before, right? So you rub something really hard for a very long period of time and you get a blister, and it's a bubble filled with fluid, right? Well, that's your body's way of trying to protect the dermal layer underneath. The epidermis, I told you, it's constantly sloughing off, right? And most of the cells are dead, especially on the surface. But the dermis is not. It's got a lot of very sensitive tissues, and that's where your nerves are. So what it does is it raises up, it protects it with a little bubble of fluids, and that's great when you're wearing a new pair of shoes. However, with Ella, her skin is so sensitive, and she doesn't have the fibers that hold this layer down to this layer. So if she even just gets brushed a little bit hard, she suddenly develops a blister. Here's a better diagram of it. This shows you this right here. So here's some different types of collagen. There's all sorts of collagen. For instance, I drink collagens 1 and 3 in the morning. But there's collagens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This right here is collagen 7. Notice how it's an anchoring fiber holding this layer of tissue all the way past the basement membrane to the dermal layer. You can see right here that the blister is forming because she doesn't have these anchors to hold this layer of tissue to this layer of tissue. Did you notice that Ella was a little bit small for a 5th grader? Why do you think her condition may also affect her nutrition? Now, if you remember that I said epithelial tissue is all over your body, it's all the way surrounding all of your major organs, both inside and out, right? So if that epidermis tissue is lining the mouth and the esophagus, that same blistering would occur there, making it difficult to swallow. So then scar tissue would accumulate, and that would cause her not to be able to ingest food. So what ends up happening is she gets a little food port in the side of her abdomen. You may have seen at the end of that video where there was a little nutrient sac that was hanging above her bed, and her mom said, "Can I unhook you?" She was unhooking her feeding port. But although we are really good at giving nutrition that way, it's not perfect. And that leads to her being a little bit malnourished and undersized. Let's see what you remember. How did Ella get the disease? You said it was genetically inherited. You're correct. What part of the body does it affect? I bet you went straight to epidermis. What are symptoms and complications of the disease? Blistering and scarring of the epidermal tissue. And how would this disease be treated or cured? Unfortunately, as a genetic disease, all we can do is minimize the symptoms and not cure the disease. Now we're going to start getting to the nitty-gritty parts of this lecture. There are 5 functions of the skin. The first is protection. It's a protective barrier against disease, dirt, and UV radiation. It is actually your first layer of defense. It is your first layer of your immune system. And it secretes this little acidic oil off the top of the skin, which can deter bacteria and viruses and other things from getting into your body. So how is skin color determined? If you remember, melanin is produced in the upper layer in the epidermis, and it both protects the skin from UV radiation. It also helps generate vitamin D. Your skin also regulates water loss. So secreted oils in the dead skin outer layer prevents water from entering or leaving the skin. So if you jumped in your pool and you didn't have that layer of oil, all of the water would go from high concentration to low concentration inside of your body, and you would just blow up, right? But instead of that, you're protected by this layer of oil, so it keeps that water from freely moving across your skin. It also can secrete water during sweat while you sweat, and release excess water in salts that way. Like I said before, that melanin not only protects you from the UV radiation, but it also helps you to generate vitamin D. It helps you to gather sensory information, so it helps you respond to the environment around you. You can see here that there are sensory receptors, like here's a cold receptor here, here's a heavy pressure receptor deep in your tissue, here's a light touch receptor up on the surface of the tissue. So if I was to touch myself like this, I'd only be triggering the light touch receptors, okay? But if I was to push hard like this, then I would trigger the heavy pressure receptors. And that's how your body knows how hard something is touching you. Your body skin also helps you to regulate body temperature. When your body's too hot, the skin helps you release to cool down by raising your vascular system, so it really raises your veins towards the surface of your skin, and then it sweats, and through evaporative cooling, it cools down those body fluids. If you're too cold, then you can start to shiver, and that movement of muscle generates extra heat. Unfortunately, if you get too cold, you can develop hypothermia, which is lower than normal body temperature, and that can interfere with the body's normal functions and eventually will lead to death. Hyperthermia is higher than normal body temperature, and it can result in dehydration and heat stroke, which unfortunately is common here in Florida. Thank you for paying attention, kiddos. Now it's off to the skeletal system.